Buenos dias, everyone, and welcome back to Retro Lucha TV. I am your host that sees all movies lucha, El Ojo, and thank you for watching our inaugural lucha film review, El Enmascarado de Plata. El Enmascarado de Plata was released in 1952, despite IMDb saying it was released in 1954. That is wrong. It was directed by the prolific director Rene Cardona, who went to direct 12 Lucha Libre films. Some of the more famous ones are Santo y Blue Demon contra los Monstruos, Santo en el Tesoro de Drácula, La Momia Azteca, El Charro de Calaveras, and Los Campeones Justicieros. El Enmascarado de Plata was filmed in Mexico and stars the legendary luchador El Médico. For those scratching your heads and asking, why would they choose El Médico instead of El Santo, whose nickname is literally El Enmascarado de Plata? Well, that is because the film was originally meant to star El Santo. For those who don't know, El Santo is a folk hero. He fought witches, vampires, gangs, monsters, spies. He sold out Arena Coliseo so often CMLL had to build Arena Mexico. Both are actually still standing, so if you're into that Mexico, go check them out. So why didn't El Santo star in the movie that kicked off a genre? A movie titled for him, with him in mind. Simple. He didn't think there was any money in film. Oh, how times have changed. El Santo would eventually go on to star in over 50 Lucha Libre films, but it is interesting that the man who started it all didn't even star in his own titled movie. Before we continue, I want you to remember, although Lucha Libre star or feature a specific wrestler, these wrestlers actually didn't play a big role in the outcome of their respective films in the early days. In fact, they would just come in when it's convenient, punch some bad guy, and leave. Nowadays, you would be a criminal for wearing a mask and punching strangers. How times do change. Also, El Enmascarado de Plata has a runtime of 2 hours long. It was actually meant to be 12 serialized episodes to be released on TV, but they ended up adding all the episodes to one super long film, which is why there are going to be some pacing issues during this review. Well, without further ado, let's get the movie started. Intro. Title card reads Episode 1, Poder Satánico. Not the movie starring Blue Demon, but we'll get to that another day. There is a massive thunderstorm. The radio says a hurricane is hitting the northeast. A map with lights is blinking. Enter the villain. He has a striped tiger print glove. I thought it was zebra print at first, since the movie is black and white and you can't see what color things are. But in the third act, it is explained these are tiger stripes, not zebra stripes, even though they are clearly white and black. He pulls a lever, the map blinks, and it rains, levees breaks, and boats crash. Either this is a weather machine, or he owns a TV that plays only natural disasters. The world is in fear due to the striped hand man. We are then transported to a smoky room with 6 men in suits talking until they get a video call on the mirror. For some reason, the gang dims the light to speak with the man in the shadow, and all you can see is a striped glove. For some reason, I'm instantly reminded of that Simpson episode. You know, the skit from season 5, episode 12, Bart Get Famous, where Homer answers the phone by saying, "Hello, you'll have to speak up, I'm wearing a towel." Back at the lab, the mysterious striped hand man reveals himself. Not sure why there was so much secrecy when he was going to reveal himself 30 seconds later, but I guess it adds drama. The masked man tells the gang that he needs money and he needs it by any means necessary. A statement that rings true for me the older I get. So he orders the gang to ransom some old man and logs off. For some reason, the film is called El Enmascarado de Plata, but the hero is El Médico Asesino, and the villain is referred to Silver Masked Man. The gang leader, who I will call El Lobo Negro, also refers to El Enmascarado de Plata as El Jefe to his goons. If you are confused, so am I. Less than 10 minutes in, and we have a weather machine, a scientist, and a film named after the villain. Cut to the love interest, Elena. She calls an office asking for Alfredo, a very Médico Asesino shaped man, but instead, Julio, his co-worker, answers, a very Enmascarado de Plata shaped man. She wants to know which of the two men sent her a gift. Julio tries to flirt, but this is when the boss comes out and tells him to get back to work on the newspaper, where we find out that Julio and Alfredo work at a newspaper. She goes back to her uncle's place, and I know what you're thinking, a grown woman living with her uncle? Doesn't she have a job? Yes, she does. But that job's never established or brought up again. And it's a good thing, because Elena's uncle actually lives in a mansion. Unfortunately, as Elena enters the home, she sees her uncle and a woman tied up with the gang surrounding her. I really hope the uncle wasn't tied up before the gang showed up. Elena sees the gang and becomes hysterical, but one of the men just knocks her out. That is one way to handle noisy people. I don't know if that would fly today, but it was the 1950s. Thankfully, El Médico Asesino is conveniently inside the mansion and jumps in and somehow takes on 6 people with Tommy guns with relative ease. El Médico and Elena release her uncle, and El Médico begins to give him a scolding about hoarding wealth because apparently it's the same as stealing. El Médico then goes on a rant that money could be used to build schools, shelters, gyms. Maybe El Médico should speak with Bruce Wayne. And if you think about it, El Médico has a reason to be mad. He is a doctor, he fights crime, and he is a luchador. Maybe El Médico should pick a better paying profession. Elena notices that El Médico is injured, and she tries to help El Médico, but El Médico says it doesn't matter, and like most men when you try to get close to them, he runs away. Then, Alfredo and Julio arrive from the noticiero, the newspaper. Then we get the reoccurring trope in this movie. Alfredo and Julio arrive after something has occurred. Elena notices that Alfredo has a scar when Julio interjects, so do I. Why do men in the 1950s just have scarred hands? Maybe it's just something that people in the 1950s did. Got in fights and had scarred hands. The villain, El Enmascarado de Plata, El Jefe, then orders the gang to kidnap Elena and ends the transmission by saying El Jefe has spoken. We get the first of 4 musical numbers of the evening. Back at the mansion, Elena gets a letter from a newsboy that reads, "You are in danger, do not go out," from El Médico. So Elena goes out, and she gets kidnapped. El Médico somehow follows her and saves her by throwing chairs at the gang. Then El Enmascarado de Plata comes up and beats up Médico with ease. El Lobo Negro asks, why don't we remove El Médico's mask? And El Enmascarado de Plata says, no, there would be no honor for him. The gang leaves him to die, but as soon as the gang leaves, both Elena and El Médico escape with relative ease. For some reason, the building catches on fire and Elena faints. So El Médico has to save Elena by taking her on the roof, where there is a conveniently placed pulley where El Médico gently takes her down to the first floor, and he somehow escapes. Then the authorities arrive. And this is how you know Elena is rich. The authorities want to speak with her and she says, no, I'm tired, and leaves. Fortunately, Julio and Alfredo show up for some reason, and Julio has his car with him. Remember how I said this was supposed to be a serialized special with 12 episodes? This is basically the rest of the movie. Something happens, Julio and Alfredo show up, and then the gang tries again. Cut to the lab, where El Médico Asesino has a lab where he has machines monitoring the city. And at this point I realize El Médico needs 3 jobs for his lab. He uses this weird machine to track police signals, but CB radios were made in 1945 during World War II and became popular in 1949. So he would have had 3 years to buy a CB radio instead of built everything out. Back at the gang's hideout, El Enmascarado de Plata is yelling at the gang about his new plan. He is going to steal a truck and decides to tell his plan to the newspaper. But the newspaper thinks it's fake and decides not to publish it. We actually get a cool shot of El Médico with a fake background. I love this scene. It's so hokey and camp, and that's all I want in my lucha films. It looks like something out of Adam West's Batman. Anywho, the gang blows up the remote control truck from El Médico. El Médico somehow finds the gang and beats them up. Then we get the next reoccurring scene of the film series. Anytime a siren is heard, El Médico leaves. He dips. He vamooses. Why? Doesn't matter. El Médico says the day is saved after having a street outside the city blown up, a truck with cargo blown up, and the main bad guy is still on the loose. We're going to speed run the rest of this. I'm only doing this because it is 2 hours long, and it's supposed to be 12 serialized episodes. Elena finds the newsboy from the first act and convinces him to leave his job for 10 pesos to help him find the man that gave him the note. And as any responsible adult would do, she takes him to Cabaret El Paraíso to find the man who gave the newsboy the letter. She calls Alfredo and Julio to meet them in the front of the cabaret. We get our musical act 2. Julio and Alfredo bring a detective. Our trio goes inside the cabaret when a man comes up to them and tells them there will be no more service. So the three of them start beating up this man, who I think was just an employee, because our trio gets kicked out of the cabaret. And now I understand why they have scars. They just fight with random people. We get our musical act number 3. And at this point I do want to mention I did try to Shazam all the musical acts so that I can have a playlist. However, Shazam nor SoundCloud could find any of these songs. I also tried typing them into Google, couldn't find them. So if you know the songs, send them to me so I can make a playlist. Back at the gang's hideout, Elena and Pecas the newsboy, or Freckles in English, are tied up. For some reason, El Medico is inside the cabaret and our trio didn't see him, and the gang goes to fight El Medico, even though he has easily taken on the entire gang with a Tommy gun. As usual, El Medico beats up the gang, and El Lobo Negro takes Elena. So El Medico Asesino and Pecas chase after him. Outside the club, El Medico scares some man and takes his car. Elena is arguing with El Lobo, so he does what any normal person would do, knock her out. El Medico Asesino has newsboy drive. He jumps in the car, knocks out El Lobo, roughly pushes him out, and gently pushes out Elena before jumping out himself, as we see a toy car fall off a cliff and explode. El Medico orders the boy to drop off Elena and return the car to the police station, and he just walks in the woods like Bigfoot. Julio and Alvaro are at Elena's place, and they tell her the boy needs to talk to the police, and she says no because she is keeping him because he is an orphan. When Julio and Alvaro leave, he tells Elena one of the voices sounds familiar, but he doesn't know who. There are only 2 options. Not sure what's confusing. Freckles is asleep upstairs until El Medico abducts him and takes him to his lab to be his sidekick. He even gives him a bell with the beeper so he can call for help. We've also find out that Freckles is 13, even though he's as tall as everyone else. Lore time, El Medico says when he was 13, his father was a medic and was killed. His dad taught him so much, so the masked man calls himself a medico to be close to his dad. So he is not a doctor. And he is called asesino by criminals because he doesn't forgive criminals. So El Medico is not a medico and definitely an asesino. El Medico leaves the boy on monitor duty. While on monitor duty, El Enmascarado de Plata puts out a fake police message that he is in a cabin in the woods. But Freckles doesn't know this, so he sends El Medico, and the showdown El Medico versus El Enmascarado de Plata begins. Freckles brings the police, but both escape out the window. And outside the cabin, Alfredo and Julio show up from opposite corners. They take him back to the noticiero where the boss, Mr. Kruger, is finally given a name, has questions for Freckles, and he takes him to get ice cream. But Mr. Kruger is beat up by the gang, and they take Freckles. In some random field, El Enmascarado de Plata is waiting for El Medico. I could not see the fight because of the lighting, but this probably would have been better in a soundstage. Anywho, El Medico throws El Enmascarado de Plata off a cliff. El Medico has no problem removing his mask, and while El Enmascarado de Plata is slowly unaliving, Medico asks who is the real leader. El Medico loses his mask, and he tells Freckles not to tell anyone who he is. El Medico says he will call the police for the body, and he has a gift for Freckles. I now understand why El Medico runs when police sirens go off. At the mansion, Alfredo and Julia have flowers for Elena, and Freckles arrives with gold, the gift from El Medico. The real bad guy, El Tigre, reveals himself, but he is wearing the same clothes as El Enmascarado de Plata, just a different mask. Why wasn't this movie called El Tigre? Anywho, we get musical number 4. After the musical, Freckles is walking down the street when he sees 2 cars speeding, so naturally he calls El Medico. The gang takes over a car park, but El Medico and Freckles come and beat up the gang. We get 2 cool shots. One where El Lobo Negro wants to blowtorch El Medico, and one with El Medico with a Tommy gun. Sirens are heard and Medico leaves, probably because he sent El Enmascarado de Plata to the Shadow Realm. At the noticiero, they get a tip that El Medico robbed a bank. This time Kruger believes him. I notice anytime the gang does anything, it's always at 10 p.m. I guess in the 1950s this was late, but nowadays that seems very early. Anywho, El Tigre uses the gang to kidnap the uncle to steal from the bank. At the bank, the evil Medico sends the security to the Shadow Realm. The real Medico and Freckles ambush the gang, and the gang have a shootout with the cops. For some reason, the police only arrest half the bad guys, while Medico and Freckles escape through the power lines and break into some old person's home and just walk out the front door. At the noticiero, the detective tells Kroger that El Medico's prints do not match the bank, so he is innocent. Not sure why the newspaper needs to know this and not, I don't know, a judge. Back at the gang's hideout, the uncle is getting beat up by the gang. Elena asks Freckles to call him Medico, but for some reason he doesn't want to. She has to beg him to help. El Medico is at the roof of the building, but somehow Tiger Mask with a hat is on there as well, so they begin fighting out. The gang starts shooting at El Medico, but good thing for El Medico, they have the accuracy of a stormtrooper. El Medico escapes by going inside the mansion when Elena asks El Medico to save her uncle again. But no need. One of the cabaret dancers, Miraya, just lets him out. Apparently she's being blackmailed by the gang, so El Medico did not help the uncle at all. We get our first and only lucha match of the film. A new gym was opened thanks to the uncle, and the main event was El Medico. For some reason, Freckles doesn't like lucha and goes on monitor duty. El Medico's lab is for some reason built into the lucha arena. El Tigre finds Freckles and blows up the lab by unplugging everything. While El Medico Asesino fights against his own worst enemy in the ring, himself, he is super aggressive. To be honest, it's kind of hard to tell who is who because the film is black and white and they are wearing the same clothes. But I'm guessing the real Medico wins as he takes off his opponent's mask and the announcer goes, "He's a fake." How the announcer would know who the real one is a mystery. El Medico takes Freckles back to the mansion and writes a letter to Freckles not to tell anyone who he is and that El Medico will disappear for a while. Not sure how you will verify this because it is handwritten and I am pretty sure El Medico has never written to Freckles. But that doesn't matter because the uncle comes in and takes the note. Back at the Tigre's lair, he pulls a lever causing lightning, bombs, and buildings falling. He goes on the radio and tells people to cooperate or there will be trouble. Uncle tells Freckles to go to the cabaret to save Miraya. Freckles actually gets taken by the gang, but Freckles holds his own against 4 grown men for a pretty good while. Lobo Negro then takes Miraya and turns on a roller to flatten Freckles outside of the cabaret. We get a cool voiceover of events, probably part of the serial idea, but it only happens 15 minutes before the film ends, so I'm not sure why it was even included. I think El Medico went on vacation because he shows up at El Paraíso and starts having trouble with 3 men when he used to be able to take on 6. And the police finally raid El Paraíso. Freckles then jumps into El Tigre's car and end up in a lab outside the city. Freckles returns the favor from earlier and blows up El Tigre's lab by unplugging everything. El Medico finds Freckles and Miraya and he beats everyone up, and Freckles is beating up Lobo Negro when the cops show up. Then we get the reveal of the movie. The obvious villain, Mr. Kruger. The handicapped newspaper owner was the villain with the weather machine. In fact, both Julio and Alfredo are in the closing shot, and the love story went nowhere. Or did it? Back at the mansion, Elena gives flowers to both men and says she likes both of them as friends. And a freckle-shaped man dressed as El Medico jumps from the 2nd floor of the mansion. And that was the first Lucha Libre film to star a luchador, but not the last. Just a sneak peek for future projects, I will be starting the Las Luchadoras film series. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon because there's a lot more luchas de tres caídas coming your way. If you have any suggestions for future videos, you can go to my Patreon or leave a comment below. This has been Retro Lucha TV. I am El Ojo. See you soon, Lucha friends. If El Tigre was Kroger, the newspaper owner, why didn't he just publish his own threats? Why does he have to justify that to his employees? It's his newspaper. Why have a love story and it not go anywhere? Why have a tease for real identities and then not do anything with that? How did the newspaper man get a weather machine?